On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not at all and 10 being the worst you've ever seen, how toxic or unpleasant do you think Terraria's online communities are? I sent this question in my Discord server a few days ago, and I talked with a lot of players about what they felt the problems in the community were, and I'd like to take a video to talk about them because I think there is a pervasive problem in the community, one that's getting worse. Now, Terraria doesn't have an excessively toxic community. We're nowhere near the levels of competitive games like League of Legends or Counter-Strike, but I did get an average response between 4 and 5, and the consistent reason for that was elitism and hostility. There's been a growing pattern in the past few years of heated arguments, debates, and toxicity around the game's meta. If you're not familiar, the meta in a video game means the strategies, tactics, and equipment that are the best. It's something you'll hear about a lot in competitive games where players want to make sure they're using the best items and are doing as much as they can to get an edge over their opponents. You'll see the word viable thrown around a lot, which really means competitively viable, or can you do well against players using meta strategies with it? The issue in Terraria comes with how experienced players treat that information and treat each other when talking about it. I want to be clear about something. The meta doesn't matter. Terraria is a primarily single-player game, and even in multiplayer, it's cooperative. It's not a particularly challenging game either. It doesn't matter what the most effective strategies are. What matters is what's fun and what's good enough to get the job done. A fairly vocal part of the community seems to have forgotten that. At the end of the day, playing the game is about having fun. What's viable in Terraria? Everything. I've beaten the game with a fucking lawnmower. It's a sandbox game, not a linear RPG. And I've been guilty of helping some of this behavior spread in the past. Particularly, I think in these two videos, I was a bit harsh when poking fun at the wiki guides, and the B-Nade follow-up was more about proving a point. And it engendered this belief with people where they assumed I cared about the meta or effective strategies, and I don't. I find it really boring, but there's this like street cred to try to maintain where you want to act like you care and push the meta, but it was always something that I never felt good about doing. By now, I'm sick of it, and I think it's bad for the community as a whole. The problem comes down to an over-insistence on there being a correct way to play the game, anger directed towards other players who give advice that is deemed suboptimal, and generally looking down on anyone using non-meta strategies in an elitist way. What is your reaction if I told you that the Stormbow and Holy Arrows are a good weapon against the Destroyer, or if I said the Mini-Shark is useful and worth buying, or, God forbid, I told you that the Tactical Shotgun was a weapon you could use? Everything I just said is not false. At worst, you could call them a bad opinion. The Stormbow and Holy Arrows are perfectly serviceable against the Destroyer. On any difficulty, they're not the overpowered combo that they used to be, but they're fine. I love the Mini-Shark. I used it heavily during Hardcore Legendary Get Fixed Boy. It's a great weapon. It's fun, it's consistent, and it does its job well. And the Tactical Shotgun, while it is bad, is a usable weapon. There is not a wrong way to play the game. The only wrong way is the one that isn't fun. I think after 13 years, and not a lot of recent content being added, some players have forgotten that and instead act like the only way to play the game is the one that's been tested to be optimal and effective. It's not unexpected. People that are still active in a community of a game this old are going to be people that take it very seriously, and over time you can lose sight of things. I've tried to push back against this before. The whole defense video, for instance, was going over why focusing solely on damage was flawed, and defense is actually very useful and valid. But that just led to an overcorrection where now people are pushing defense as the meta. It didn't fix the problem, it just changed the conversation. The vast majority of players don't do what I'm describing here, but a vocal subset does, particularly among people that are frequently active in Terraria's communities, and they behave in a way that pushes people out. I've personally left a lot of Terraria communities over time because the people inside were just unpleasant to be around. Take the help channel in the official Terraria Discord server. At face value, it looks like a place where new players can go to for support. Scratch past the surface and you'll see a community of players that berate and make fun of people asking for help. There's a private Discord server for the people active there with a channel where helpers take screenshots of people just to make fun of them for not knowing about the game. And sure, sometimes people say dumb stuff and that can be funny, but when I was in that server, it came off as mean-spirited and elitist rather than lighthearted fun. And it's not just overt unpleasantness. Sometimes people have bad days or situations can get heated, and you get some bad apples. Unpleasant people do exist. But the concept of acting like there's a black and white truth to Terraria is flawed. Yes, there are more effective strategies, but that doesn't make them inherently better advice, because more effective doesn't mean more fun. In fact, I would argue optimal strategies tend to be less fun and bad advice because you don't engage with the game in the same way. I talked about all this during my defense video, where I didn't like beating the game with a lawnmower because I had to min-max an optimized tank build, but I really enjoyed beating it with a flare gun because I could use whatever jank I wanted. Also, players can struggle with actually pulling off the strategies, particularly when it comes to stuff like whip stacking. Just because an experienced player can pull off a very fast kill time in a vacuum does not mean that it's the best strategy, it doesn't mean other weapons are useless, and it definitely doesn't mean you should insult players for not doing it. So, when a new player comes around asking for advice or talking about their playthrough, don't jump to trying to get rid of them with a snide remark and a link to the wiki or a YouTube video. Try to be positive and welcoming. Talk to them, make a community that people will want to be part of, not one that reinforces an elite group at the expense of everyone else. If somebody says they're having a lot of fun with a Gatligator, don't tell them they're a dumbass and the weapon is bad. If it works for them, there's nothing wrong with using it. And if they're struggling, you could suggest trying the Onyx Blaster out. You shouldn't ever be getting angry and heated over stuff like this. If you are, ask yourself why. What's making you angry? Do you want to be someone that gets upset over a player using a weapon you don't like? Do you want to be known as the guy that can't drop an argument and always has to win? And similarly, when other experienced players weigh in, don't act like they're idiots and push them out of communities. I've been on the receiving end of that a lot. The whole point of the defense video was to stop people from doing that whenever someone suggested using warding reforges. That was also kind of the point of the medium core video. People would act very unpleasant anytime someone suggests playing medium core. Just a couple days ago, I was saying that I like the Minishark, only to find out that someone in that conversation was trashing me in a different server for being stupid and not knowing anything. Now, I do have a public presence, so people like disagreeing with me for clout, but it doesn't just happen to me. If a person suggests using the Vortex Beater against the Moonlord, you shouldn't go, are you fucking stupid? The Phantasm has way better DPS. If you disagree, you could say, the Vortex Beater can work well, especially since the fight is pretty chaotic and it can be hard to focus on aiming, but the Phantasm gets better damage as long as you're hitting your shots, so I prefer that one. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're right. You can win an argument to feel good about yourself. You were right, you're better than them, and you proved it. But starting arguments and treating people poorly is a cycle. It's going to lead to the only people that stick around being argumentative and toxic. Over time, you're going to find yourself in a community where those arguments are always happening, where everybody hates each other and just wants to be correct and feel like they won. Conversations around the meta are not the only problem in Terraria's communities, but I think it's the primary source of unpleasantness right now, and the things that I've said to make communities more welcoming can apply to anywhere. I'm sure many of you are aware of the Calamity mod community being known for toxicity, and I think that's a good case study in what happens when players keep up those elitist notions and it becomes accepted to behave like that. You'll push out the more reasonable players and get stuck in a hateful cycle, and once you get a reputation of toxicity, it can be very hard to change that. That's why it's important to stop it before it becomes pervasive. A few weeks ago, I was talking with some people in a wiring server while doing research for my wiring guide, and after a while, an admin comes in asking us what kind of hookers we need to buy to get us to shut the fuck up, calling me a freeloading loser, insulting us on and off for hours, and just dripping with toxicity in every word. And the server owner backed them up, we all got banned, and we were very put off from ever affiliating with the people involved again. Experiences like that have led me to where I am now, where I barely interact with Terraria communities outside of my server due to unpleasant experiences, and I'm not the only one. This doesn't mean you should insult people that do this, because that's not going to solve anything. I see people insult Calamity players or developers a lot, and all that's doing is encouraging them to respond aggressively. It's just reversing the roles. Now you're in the group of people that's better than the others, and they're going to be annoyed. Now, certain Terraria communities are more welcoming than others. You'll get bad apples everywhere, but what matters is how you respond when it happens. You, watching this right now, and all of your fellow players are who decide what the community's culture is like. If you sit there and watch someone acting toxic towards another player, then go about your day, that behavior isn't going to stop. If you support them, make fun of the people they were arguing with behind their back, or start arguments that you can't let go of, you're helping that behavior spread. But you can do something about it. Act positively and be somebody people want to be near. Tell people off when they're being toxic, or talk to server or forum moderators about it. This video is me doing something about it.